Today, more than ever perhaps, women are being taught to believe that when the body falls silent, it signals absence, emptiness, or even emotional failure. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if that silence is actually the soul's very first whisper? When a woman, whether by choice or without realizing it, begins to pull away from the games of desire and the cages of shallow affection, something far deeper begins to surface. It isn't absence at all, it's presence. It's not a lack, but an expansion. As Carl Jung might say, repressed energy always finds a new way to appear. And when the body no longer chases after immediate pleasures, and when the body stops being consumed by the pursuit of instant pleasure, the soul is finally given room to speak. Have you ever asked yourself why so many women, after periods of abstinence, describe a sudden spiritual awakening? A sharpened sensitivity, dreams more vivid, intuition more precise. This isn't coincidence, it's a calling. With no external touch to distract it, the body begins to look inward. And in that long-neglected inner realm, the woman begins to uncover parts of herself she had never known. Parts unseen not just by others, but even by herself. This isn't simply about celibacy, it's transmutation. It is an energy no longer seeking outwardly what must be nurtured within. It's a shift, an energy turning inward, no longer looking to others for what can only be grown from within. In a society built on endless sexual validation, the woman who withdraws becomes feared. She is no longer predictable, no longer easy to reach. She becomes mysterious, untouchable. And even more so, she begins to see beyond it all. The games, the emotional loops, the mask of relationships that confine more than they liberate. Jung would call this meeting the shadow, a moment when a woman stops chasing the need to be chosen and starts choosing for herself. No longer loving just to be loved, but loving herself so fiercely that the superficial fades away without effort. There is a kind of silence that holds no emptiness. It is sacred, a temple. When the body stills, it is not shutting down. It is making way for the soul to spark a light that unsettles. A woman without sex or relationships is not hollow. She may, in fact, be more alive than ever before. What looks like absence is actually a deep, vibrant inner presence. What appears as loneliness is a profound communion with something no fleeting passion could ever reach. And in that space, something ancient stirs. The wild woman awakens. She returns to her instincts, to her ancestral wisdom, to a femininity that needs no stage, no applause. Can you feel it? This calling is not for everyone. It speaks to the ones who are weary of exchanging their essence for fleeting moments of false connection. It's for those who've come to understand that what they're truly searching for will never be found in someone else's bed, but only through a raw, radical meeting with themselves. And if you've stayed with these words this far, maybe you're already closer to that path than you know. Yes, the body grows quiet, but not out of weakness. That stillness is strength pulling back to become power, and once the soul begins to speak, there's no turning back. A woman who has heard her soul will never again settle for the faint echo of an ordinary love. There comes a time in every woman's life when the world's noise becomes too much. Not the noise outside, but the quiet pressure within. Expectations that never belonged to her. Desires she was taught to feel. Affections handed down as unquestionable truths. And in the weariness born from all of that, so subtle it's invisible to others, the real journey begins. The journey back to herself. Carl Jung once said that what we deny within returns as fate. And maybe that's why, when the body chooses silence, it's not failing. It's signaling that something far greater is ready to emerge. The woman who starts pulling away from the impulses that once directed her, without even knowing why, is already answering a silent call. A call not from her flesh, but from her soul. And with that comes a strange ache, a nameless longing. Not for a man, not for a touch or a night of passion, but for herself. For a place she hasn't yet reached, though she knows it exists. In this light, abstinence is no punishment. It is a threshold. And crossing it begins what Jung described as individuation, the radical journey toward becoming whole. What looks like emptiness is not absence at all. It's space being cleared for something more real to be born. In that open space, old memories begin to ache differently, not as wounds, but as clues pointing to a deeper story. The relationships that ended, the nights soaked in tears, the endless cycles, all begin to make sense under a new light. Because the woman who embraces silence isn't stepping away from life. She is rewriting her story from a place she had never written from before. From this new vantage point, her inner self begins to observe emotions as symbols, mirrors reflecting an unconscious that had always spoken, but was drowned out by the clamor of desire. Slowly, she realizes she no longer craves applause or external approval. Her worth is no longer tied to how much others long for her body, but to how deeply she can sit with her soul in silence. And from that stillness, something nearly mystical is born, the power of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen. And that's when the world starts to fear her, because it cannot comprehend someone who has stopped begging for love. She becomes whole, and that wholeness is dangerous to everything that still clings to halves. And when she realizes that her vital energy hasn't vanished, only retreated, she enters a new consciousness, a space with no urgency, no need to prove. Because the body's silence isn't punishment, it's a language only those brave enough to dwell in their own depths can understand. Jung would call it a reconciliation with the feminine unconscious, a reconnection to ancient symbols buried beneath centuries of repression. Symbols long buried beneath centuries of repression begin to stir, not through speech, but through a presence that cannot be denied. A woman is awakening, slowly, defiantly. But this path is not gentle. An invisible anguish begins to surface, a quiet ache from deep within. As she pulls away from immediate pleasures, from the comfort of familiar touch, from the warmth of another body beside hers, she also steps away from everything that once anchored her sense of belonging. What remains is an unsettling stillness, a raw discomfort, as though the world itself no longer sees her, no longer acknowledges her. Her absence from the theatre of desire renders her invisible. Jung would call this the beginning of the encounter with the shadow. The repressed self, shaped by years of conformity and hunger for validation, now refusing to wear the mask any longer. Doubt creeps in. She wonders, was I wrong to walk away? Am I losing my mind? Wasting time, youth, chances? For the world shouts that a woman's time is brief, her worth measured in movement, in beauty, in being wanted. And now she no longer fits the mold, not lover, not wife, not muse, not girlfriend. Just herself. And that hurts more than any rejection. Abstinence begins to feel like exile, but it is not punishment, it is initiation. A symbolic rite reserved for the soul ready to transcend. Temptations come knocking, old stories resurface, the past whispers with seductive familiarity. It is a test, and perhaps the cruelest part, no one around her understands. Friends urge her to go out more, family worries about her detachment. But this is not withdrawal, this is immersion. A deep dive few are brave enough to take while the world drifts along the surface. Jung called this individuation, the moment the ego panics as the soul begins to lead. It is in this silent disorientation that many retreat, settling for half-lived love, choosing comfort over truth. But the woman who stays, through the tears, the longing, the quiet, is being reshaped by forces greater than herself. She is breaking a cycle, and cycles are not shattered by willpower, they are transformed through awareness. The pressure she feels is not a mistake, but a metamorphosis. The cocoon tightens before it breaks open, and deep in the stillness something ancient stirs, a new being gestating in the sacred silence. She may not be able to name it. She may fear she is too alone, too misunderstood, too deep. But there is a voice that persists, not loud, but constant. A presence that walks beside her even when unseen. This is the archetypal feminine, the sacred bridge between consciousness and mystery. She begins to commune with it, and through that internal dialogue she understands her body is not idle, it is in ritual. A ritual the modern world has forgotten, but one her soul has always remembered. And then, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. The restlessness becomes inquiry. Why have I needed to be desired to feel alive? Why does absence feel like death? What part of me still survives on the gaze of others? Because the woman who embraces silence is not vanishing. She is rewriting her narrative, observing her emotions not as flaws, but as sacred symbols of a once muted unconscious. She no longer craves applause. She no longer needs validation. Her worth is no longer tethered to desirability, but to her ability to hold her soul's presence in stillness. And from that silence, a mystical force is born, the force of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen. And the world begins to fear her, because it does not know how to handle a woman who no longer begs for love. She becomes whole, and wholeness is dangerous to anything that thrives in fragments. When she realizes her vitality has not died, only gathered, she enters a new consciousness. One without urgency, without the need to prove. Because the silence of the body is not a sentence, it is a language. And only those brave enough to inhabit its depths will ever understand what it says. This is not simply a phase of isolation, but a sacred reconciliation with the feminine unconscious. An ancient memory buried under centuries of noise, neglect, and repression. She is not merely withdrawing, she is remembering. Symbols lost to time begin to stir, not through words, but through presence. Her presence. The quiet reawakening of a woman who has long been lost to the demands of being everything for everyone else. But this journey, make no mistake, is not gentle. It is not filled with the comfort of certainty. Instead, it is laced with restlessness, a gnawing anguish invisible to the outside world, yet undeniable within. As she slowly steps back from immediate pleasures, from the warmth of familiar touch, from the gravitational pull of another body beside hers, she also begins to untangle from the roles that once defined her. Lover, partner, object of longing. Without these anchors, she begins to drift. The world seems to recoil in her absence, as though it cannot recognize a woman who is no longer in service to its gaze. She is disappearing, but not into oblivion, into something deeper, unnamed, something the surface world no longer understands. What's left in this departure is not peace, but a raw, brutal discomfort. A sense that her absence from the theatre of desire has rendered her invisible to those still enacting the old play. There is a silent war taking place beneath her skin. A war between the woman she was and the one she's just beginning to become. Jung would say she has stepped into the shadow's domain where the repressed self waits, the self that contorted to fit in, that sought validation like breath, but now refuses to keep pretending. It refuses to smile when it wants to scream. At this point, her mind floods with doubt. Did she make a mistake turning inward? Is she losing her mind? Is she squandering the precious currency of time, youth, and beauty? The world is quick to remind her that a woman's time is short, that she should be desirable, visible, productive, that she should be smiling in photographs, touching hands, being claimed. But now none of those scripts fit. She finds herself in a void, neither here nor there, not chosen, not needed, not labeled. And this unclaimed space feels terrifying, like free-falling into a self she has never fully met before. Suddenly, she no longer belongs. She's no longer anyone's muse, no one's desire, no one's mission to conquer. She is not a title or a role. She is simply herself, raw, unfiltered, uncertain. And this unfamiliar identity aches in ways no heartbreak ever could. This abstinence from external validation feels at first like a punishment, a cruel exile from the warmth of connection. But in truth, it is a rite of passage, a sacred trial that only souls brave enough to face the void can survive. Temptations come dressed in nostalgia. Old lovers reappear, comforting patterns whisper seductive nothings, opportunities that once thrilled her knock again. But now they feel hollow. Everything is testing her resolve. And the worst part, no one sees the battle she's fighting. Friends urge her to go out more, to laugh, to distract herself. Family urges her to smile, to engage, to return to normal. But this is not disconnection, it is descent. It is immersion into her own depths. Most are not prepared to witness such a sacred unraveling. Jung called this the edge of individuation, when the ego loses grip and the soul quietly takes the wheel. It's terrifying. It's silent, and it's necessary. In this stillness, she begins to be reshaped, not by the world's demands, but by something ancient and immense within her, something that cannot be rushed or reasoned with. She is being summoned, not by love, not by longing, but by the soul's deep whisper to break the cycle. And cycles don't break through rebellion or rage. They break through awareness, through being fully awake in the discomfort, resisting the pull to numb, to settle, to perform. The ache she feels is not failure, it is transformation. Like the cocoon crushing the caterpillar so the butterfly can emerge. She is not collapsing, she is becoming. Something sacred is gestating in the silence, in the sleepless nights, in the tears that fall without reason. She can't name it yet, but she knows it's real. There is a voice, soft, steady, that does not scream but refuses to be ignored. There is a presence beside her, not human, but deeply familiar. She doesn't see it, but she knows it. This is the archetypal feminine, the anima, the one Jung called the bridge between the conscious and the unknown. This presence isn't fixing her, it's reminding her who she's always been beneath all the noise. The deeper she sinks into this internal dialogue, the more she begins to understand. Her body has not betrayed her. It is not dormant. It is in sacred ritual. It is protecting the soul as it sheds all falsehoods. This ritual is ancient, older than memory, and though forgotten by the modern world, it lives in her bones. Slowly, a shift begins. At first, it's barely noticeable, but restlessness gives way to inquiry. Her questions deepen. Why did I believe I had to be desired to feel real? Why did I measure my worth by another's gaze? Why did silence scare me so much? These questions are not complaints, they are keys. They unlock new realms of awareness. And in that awareness, she sees through the illusion of relationships that were distractions, affection that came with conditions, love that needed to be earned. She now knows her solitude is not punishment. It is sanctuary. Her body is not withholding, it is healing. Not closing off, but preparing. For something not born of need, but of truth. Something not pulled from desperation, but offered from wholeness. Her abstinence is protection. Her silence is language. Her pause is power. The moment she realizes she no longer needs to be sought after is the moment she ignites. She becomes the center of her own universe, the fire at the heart of her own life. A revealing, radiant light that no longer flickers in fear, but blazes with self-knowing. And this light is blinding to those who once knew her dimmed. They step back, uncertain of who she's become, unsure if they ever really knew her. But she does not grieve their retreat. Those who are not ready for the intensity of her transformation are not meant to stay. And those who arrive now must come whole, must come true, must come willing to meet her at the depth she now lives in. Because she is no longer available for halfway love or half-spoken truths. She is not a project, not a consolation, she is sacred ground. The woman who has crossed through her own silence is not returning to the world as she was. She is becoming the world, mysterious, powerful, whole. And her every step is now a conscious act of reverence, not driven by fear of loneliness, but by deep reverence for her own company, her own truth, her own soul. Her body, once quieted by doubt and desperation, now hums at a frequency so subtle, so profound, it vibrates with the rhythm of truth. There is no longer urgency in her being, no rush to be filled, no need to contort into spaces too small for the vastness of who she's become. The emptiness she once feared is now her sacred space. She no longer sees it as void, but as fullness unclaimed. Jung once said, "What we deny submits us. What we integrate transforms us." And she, this woman who has faced herself without flinching, has integrated her absences. She no longer runs from what once haunted her. She has made peace Her mere being is a message. You can survive what tried to silence you. And more than survive, you can rise, unashamed and undiminished. What she lost, she now wears as a crown. What once wounded her now forms the architecture of her wisdom. The empty spaces no longer ache. They resonate. Every goodbye, every ending, every abandonment. It all sounds different now. Not as tragedy, but as liberation. Each absence was an answer. Each silence, a doorway. She has crossed the threshold. The body once withheld has become sacred ground. A temple where soul and silence meet. She is no longer starving for love because she has discovered the hidden feast within her own spirit. This nourishment is not loud, not flashy. It is still but infinite. It doesn't come from external touch or gaze. It comes from the realization that her worth was never contingent on another's recognition. She does not return to the world to be claimed. She returns to take her place, unasked and unapologetic. Her voice, once doubted, now carries weight. Her silence, once seen as absence, is now power. She does not need to be everything to everyone. She only needs to be true to herself. And when desire does return, it will be sacred, deliberate, chosen. Not compulsive, not confused. When love finally arrives again, it will knock on the door of a woman who no longer waits by the window. It will find someone who is no longer a girl hoping to be loved, but a woman who is love, who chooses love only when it rises to meet her. Until that day comes, she does not wait. She watches, she listens. She holds vigil over her own becoming. This is not abstinence, it is devotion. A sacred pause where the noise of the world fades and the voice of the soul grows loud enough to be heard. She understands now, the quiet body does not mean a dead one. It means a consecrated one. A place where something holy is being forged. A temple built not from desire, but from stillness. She has not gone cold. She is a light on another plane. Where others see withdrawal, she sees expansion. The body no longer needs to scream to be noticed. It hums, it radiates, it knows. This is what awakening feels like. The realization that your silence was never emptiness. It was the language of the divine preparing you. And now that preparation is bearing fruit. She becomes her own sanctuary. Her body becomes her altar. And when the soul finally speaks, the entire universe leans in to listen. Because what was once lack, what once felt like absence, now reveals itself as sacred fullness. Not missing, becoming. Everything has changed, yet nothing was wasted. The hunger, the pain, the confusion. It was all part of the alchemy. Every experience has been transmuted into wisdom. Desire has softened. Pain has matured. She no longer bleeds from wounds. She speaks from scars. And these scars are not signs of brokenness, but of rebirth. She walks now, not in deprivation, but in abundance. The abundance of knowing who she is. She is untouchable, not because she's closed, but because she's whole. There is nothing left to exploit, nothing to manipulate. She is no longer vulnerable to illusion. Not every woman makes this crossing, but those who do become oracles. Their presence shifts the energy in a room. Their stillness commands respect. And when they love with such wholeness that it heals by mere proximity. This is the power of abstinence transformed into sovereignty. Can you feel it stirring within you? That quiet recognition, that subtle ache. That is not fear. That is memory. Soul memory. Something within you remembering the path before you even step on it. You are not broken. You are awakening. There is something ancient awakening inside you. A restlessness that does not seek escape, but seeks meaning. You no longer fit in places that once felt safe. Conversations feel too shallow. Performances too tiring. And yet you cannot explain why. This is not collapse. It is the call. You are beginning to hear the music underneath the noise, the whisper beneath the words. This video, this message, maybe it didn't just happen to find you. Maybe it was always meant for you. A mirror, a map, a soft nudge toward the part of you you've hidden. If this voice stirred something silent in you, do not turn away. Let it rise. Let it breathe. Let it guide. Share it with the women who are also walking barefoot across the fire of their own becoming. The ones who don't yet know they're not lost. They're evolving. Comment below. Speak your truth. Let it land. And if your soul seeks more of this depth, this truth, this path of remembering, stay with us. Subscribe. Walk with us. Every word here is intentional. Every silence is sacred. Every video is a rite. Because in the end, what remains is this: a woman reborn through silence, a soul now fluent in its own language. The path is not crowded, it is not loud, but it is real. If you've made it here, it means something inside you has already begun to stir.